Hey friends, and welcome to this Fretted Friday. And in today's show, we're going to look at the Integral close miking system coming right up. Yep, so this was sent to me by Sam Systems, and I'd like to say a big thank you to Richard. We caught up first at the NAMM show. Anyway, let's talk today about this Integral close miking system, because it is potentially, for a lot of you who gig, an absolutely fantastic time and labour saver. Because what happens with this is this gets put inside your speaker cab and gets really close up, puts a microphone system right close to your speakers. So it's purely analog, there's no batteries, preamp or phantom power required, although it does give a balanced output. And the thing with this is, it's not designed, and I'm going to keep saying this, it's not designed to sound like a microphone, like an SM57 mic. It's very flat. It's got a neutral frequency response, which means it's uncoloured. And it won't sound like an SM57 or similar, but it allows a lot more control at the sound desk, because when a sound engineer, and as a sound engineer myself, I can tell you that this is definitely the case. When you've got a guitar and you want it to cut through the mix, you generally have to boost the mid and top frequencies, which often with normal microphones adds a lot of extra hiss into the sound. And that's not exactly what you want. So what this allows you to do is it gives you a much flatter frequency response and allows that guitar sound to cut through the mix much better anyway, without adding that extra hiss. So it's not really a fair test to compare this in the studio, but we will be comparing it later, just so that you can hear the difference. And also I'll put up some stats for you so that you can see visually the difference as well. But I'll be comparing it later using it at a gig through the sound desk as well. So that will be a follow-on video. But first, we'll go and see how easy this is to install. Okay, to make this a fair test, the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to offer up the Integral unit. We're going to find the edge of the speaker cone and we're going to offer this up, and we're going to get it right in the center where it will be. And then I'm just going to indent that a little bit so that I can see where the microphone will be inside the cabinet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark that spot with this little badge, like so. And now I know that I can test the sound of the speaker with the Sennheiser E906, with the Lewitt MTP440 and the SM57, so that we can make a direct comparison with the coloured sound of the Integral and the coloured sound of each of those three mics, so that you can have a bit of a comparison. Now we're just running through the orange Tiny Terror into the Harley Benton cab, and thankfully this ditto pedal, looper pedal by TC Electronic, actually saves the last thing I played into the memory, so we can actually use the same riff that we used when I was testing the mic, which was this one. So there we go. First up, we'll test the Sennheiser E906. Okay, so this is the Sennheiser E906. Okay, next up we have the Lewitt MTP440. Now with the Shure SM57. Right, well that was pretty tricky, because these are held in with screws and bolts, sorry, with bolts rather than screws, and all I had to take them out with was a pair of pliers. But I've managed to get this Vintage 30 speaker detached. There it is. And we'll just pop that very carefully down on the floor. There's our little badge, and that's where our mic's going to go. So what we're going to do is going to put the system in exactly where it was. Okay, I think that's the closest to that miking position we're going to get. Just going to take off this bit of cable tie, and then we'll leave that out to one side, and just check we're going to have space to get it to one of the, because I think what I'm going to do is possibly mount it in one of the handles here. So, but for the time being, we could just get it to stick through the back of the cab output. So we'll play with that in a minute. First things first, let's get this Vintage 30 back on top of the, very carefully, on top of the integral miking system. And then we'll put this speaker back together again. And we're just going to record directly into the Zoom recorder, and with exactly the same level settings for this as we did for the other three mics. So I'm not changing anything on here. So this is now the integral system at exactly the same volume as the others. So that's the direct signal from the integral system coming straight out of this XLR at the back and into my little Zoom H4n recorder, exactly the same as the Sennheiser E906, the Lewitt MTP440 and the Shure SM57. So let's see what you think of this integral system in terms of sound quality. So there you go, that is what it sounds like, and in fact here is what the curves look like when you look at the EQ and response curves. We start with the E906, we've then got the MTP440, the standard SM57, and then finally down here the integral frequency response curve. And you'll see from the frequency response curve just how much more at the top end there is a much flatter frequency response from the integral system, which makes it easier to EQ. So as a quick recap, what are the pros and cons as far as I'm concerned with this system? Well, the pros are that it's able to accept extremely high volumes, and actually this system reacts better at gig levels than it does at recording studio, or certainly my studio levels, and so that's really good. It does also have a bonus of reducing distortion and feedback in the signal path. It's going to have a consistent output. Once you've set it up and put it in your cab, that microphone doesn't move, so at every gig it should sound exactly the same. Obviously, once you go through the sound desk, any good sound engineer will tell you that you have to EQ for the room, but the starting setting will be exactly the same each time because it won't have moved. So from an engineer's point of view, it's great for consistency. It's pretty easy to install, and it's set and forget. Once it's done, you only need to do it once. You don't need to move it or change anything. The output on it is a balanced output, which is great for getting into a sound desk and into recording equipment, and is an engineer's dream rather than it being an unbalanced output. Another pro is that you don't have to carry additional microphones and microphone stands and clutter your stage with a microphone in front of the speaker because it's already there and built in. You just need the XLR cable that you'd have needed for a microphone anyway. And finally, putting that little disc in front of your cone will disperse and give some diffusion to the higher, harsher frequencies that are associated when you stand right in front of a guitar speaker. If you've ever been to a gig and you've stood directly in front of a 4x12 or right in front of the guitarist's cab, it's really, really high frequency response there, and it's almost unbearable. Well, having that little disc in front pushes that sound out to the side and above and below and mitigates that to a certain degree. So they're all the pros. So how about the cons to this system? What doesn't it do? Well, that's really easy. The first thing is that it isn't easily transferred, because once you've installed this onto your speaker system, you've had to take the whole cabinet apart, you've had to take the speaker out, you've put this in, and this is then sandwiched between the speaker and the cabinet front baffle, and that is not easy to change over really quickly. But to be fair, why would you want to? That's the whole point of the system. And then secondly, the only other con I can see is that some people, particularly in a recording situation rather so much as a live situation where an engineer will love this, it is EQ'd to taste. And as you'll have seen from the sound samples I've given you today, it does not sound like an SM57. And a lot of people will want that SM57 type tone, and that is going to need dialing in. You're going to need to EQ it. So if you can call that a downside, it is a downside, but remember the upside of that is also that you've got a lot better controls over the mid and high ends and getting your guitar tones to cut through the mix. So you're going to be very popular with your sound engineers. I really hope you've enjoyed this today, folks. I've enjoyed installing it and fiddling about with this, and I think it's going to be a real good addition to my kit, and I think when I get to use it live, I'll show you again just how useful it is. In the meantime, as always, I love to hear your comments and thoughts on this in the comment section down below. I'll put links in the description to samsystems.co.uk and integraluk.com down in the description as well. And I really look forward to your feedback. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a like, a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet, obviously, it can't hurt to subscribe. I'll be back with the best content I can. You guys have yourselves an absolutely great weekend. And as always, my friends, you take good care.